All right, we'll go ahead and get started this morning. Well, welcome to Friday Morning Coffee. So I'm glad you guys came. My name is Rob Johnson. I'm Manager of Organizational Development for Human Technologies, and to my left is Jennifer Lackey, who is Manager of Organizational Solutions for HTI. What we do for the organization, or at least what we have the opportunity to do, is to go out and work with customers who have needs in the HR arena, whether it's leadership development, culture change initiatives, or part of what we're going to talk about today, which is kind of managing a reduction in force. And the first Friday of every month, if you've not attended before, and we're seeing some familiar faces and we're seeing a lot of new faces, we do have this live here in Greenville, and we also stream it live. So if you can't join us, you can join us from your desk, or you can actually, we will post the recording on our YouTube channel, and we'll send that link out as well. So if you miss any of the ones that we've done in the past, definitely check them out. We've had some good topics over the last year, and we have some great topics coming up over the next couple of months. Jen, we have next month we are going to have Ochiltree Deacons coming in to talk about just sort of the changes to FMLA and the impact. And so you want to fill that in real quick?
Right. So we have there are a lot of changes with the same-sex marriage laws that recently came out, and so there are significant impacts to the organization policies. So whether that be Family Medical Leave Act or benefits, and so there are a lot of different aspects of your documentation that should change. And so Stephen is going to join us next month to talk
Stephen
about that.
Woods, who's one of the partners with Ochiltree Deacons, is going to come in and talk with us about sort of the impacts and how it needs to affect your employee manuals, your policies for FMLA, your policies for leave, essentially the changes you need to make sure you have organizationally to address the changes that the laws have affected. So we actually, in fact, hashtag OFMC, if anybody uses Twitter, I know I can see at least one in the back of the room I know uses it a lot. So thank you, Alicia, for setting this up this morning. We wanted to talk about today, and what's interesting is we've had a number of really good years where this topic has not come up as much. You had the 2008 to 2010 time frame where everyone talked about was reductions in force, layoffs, mass layoffs. And the reality is the economy has gotten much better. It really has. It's continuing to uptick, and we're seeing that. But it doesn't really change the need for us to think about these services. In fact, actually, we have seen in fourth quarter of last year and going into the first quarter of this year an uptick on the number of requests we are getting for information about services. And the reality of managing a layoff is that most organizations spend a lot of time thinking about how they're going to hire someone. Who's the right fit? Do they fit us? Are they a technical fit? How do we get them on board? What's our onboarding process? As an HR professional or a operations professional, when was the last time you actually really sat down and went, what if this doesn't work out? How am I going to manage this process? And I think it's like a lot of things that we just don't want to really think about, that we may actually have to lay off an individual or a group, or that our business might take a downturn. This is that negative piece of business that none of us really want to put a lot of effort into, just because the thought of it, it's admitting that it might happen, and it's a frightening thing. And more often than not, when we get a call from a client that's facing an issue, we get the same questions, and it begins with, I don't know where to start. I don't know what to do. Or they're partially down a path where they feel like maybe it's not going as well as they hoped it would, and now they're trying to backtrack a little bit and figure out how they can readjust and what can be done differently. At the end of the day, we encourage all of our clients, regardless of who they want to work with, to really focus on the legacy that they want to leave, not only in the community, but with their existing employees. If anybody here has ever actually managed a reduction workforce, what's tough is it's difficult for the people that are leaving the organization, but it's incredibly difficult for the people that are remaining in the organization. There is absolutely survivor's guilt. So how do you make sure that you maintain the level of productivity that the people that are remaining have, that you maintain the level of just comfort in their roles? You know, the understanding that we're making this decision so that we can protect the rest of the positions within the company. We want to make sure that we finish strong, that we respect those associates that are leaving, that we respect those associates that are remaining. We're going to talk this morning a lot about the mechanics of it, and it's really going to be a lot front-loaded. It's going to be the things you need to be doing before the announcement ever happens. We're going to kind of carry it through the announcement. If you've not been here before, this is very much an open forum. So at any point during this process, if you have a question or you have a comment or you feel like there's something you want to share with the group, share it. This is how we work. We believed a long time ago that we wanted the opportunity to meet with HR and operations professionals that just had questions. We're trying to pick topics that don't get talked about as often and see what you have to say about them as well. So feel free to reach out. Before we get too far into this, Jen, do you have anything you want to add? Or
Just a couple things. So
we might be passing the mic back and forth.
As far as reductions in force,
Put that right there.
Rob and I, over the course, we've both been in this field for just over 20 years, and we've experienced it both on assisting organizations that we're consulting with and being a part of organizations that have gone through reductions. And so, because both are very unique, right now we're working with a couple of organizations that are going through significant reductions, and just the impact to the people, but it's their stories to be able to participate in this part of their life and help them with transition is quite amazing. So Robin mentioned we're going to talk about the mechanics, but we're also going to talk about how partnering with them and helping them move to the next phase of their professional career and how helpful that is to individuals that are being impacted. So.
Absolutely. So, in fact, actually, I think what we'll do going forward. So, if we're going to pass it off, or you have something to say, I'm just going to give you this mic because this is just let's just give up on that one for this morning. Is anybody here familiar with the WARN Act? Anybody ever had to deal with the WARN Act? It's what's interesting about it as a concept. There's so many laws that have been put in place, and they were put in place with the right thought in mind. It's making sure that an organization just can't shut down. And there'll be a couple of comments that we'll make today because I've had the opportunity over years to witness organizations that handle this process really well, and I've had the opportunity to witness organizations that handle really poorly. One of our counterparts, Lori Braswell, who is our Director of Human Resources, she's actually at a client site in North Carolina today. There is a large group of people that is leaving a facility just north of Asheville, and today is their last day. So she is on site supporting that group. But we've worked in processes where we were standing in the parking lot of a facility with the HR manager handing out letters because the operations group had chained the doors and just said, we essentially are not open for business anymore. Go to this hotel and there will be someone there to talk to you about what's going to happen. For the record, that's not the right way to do it. If you're questioning, that's the bad way. So, but we've also worked with organizations. The longest managed reduction in force I've ever been a part of was 22 months. And we had a customer that was dissolving a joint venture, and they actually brought us on site almost 2 years in advance to work with their associates as they left in waves. And it's, as far as from a planning standpoint, probably the best I've seen ever done, but also one of the most expensive I've ever seen done. And they invested a lot in their organization, a lot in their people. And most of those people now, if you go find any of them, they'll tell you they love the way it was handled. So when it comes to the WARN Act, just a couple of quick things. If you're not familiar with the WARN Act, I just want to give you some stats on it. Really, it stands for the Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act. It was put in place in '98. Ultimately, what it was put in place to do was to make sure that employees were protected, that depending upon the size of the company, that they couldn't just show up and find out that they didn't have a job anymore. The organizations that it typically impacts are companies that are 100 or more employees. And essentially what it says is that an employer has to give their employees or the representatives of their employees 60 days notification before they're going to close a facility. It also says that they have to give the local workforce adjustment group, so essentially the federal government or the state government, notice that this is happening, and also the highest elected official in that area. And it has to be in writing. They essentially have to submit something saying, we are closing this facility. This is the total number of people that are being impacted. This is when it's going to happen. When you're looking at sort of the numbers, and I wrote a few of these down because I want to make sure that I got them correct because it does get a little complicated. It really affects plant closings and mass layoffs. It covers 100 or more not counting workers that have worked less than 6 months in the last 12 months or worked less than 20 hours a week. It is also if you're shutting down a facility or an operating unit for greater than 6 months, if you have 50 or more people losing their jobs within 30 days, if it's if greater than 500 are affected, you have to notify automatically. If it's within 50 and 499, it has to be at least 33% of your workforce to be impacted. So there's a lot of math when you begin to look at kind of how you're going to manage a reduction in force. It's making sure that honestly, that your calculations are correct. And this really comes from who do we notify? Because if you miss that number, what can end up happening is if you don't notify the people appropriately, the typical fine is $500 per day for every day not notified. The great thing is the state and federal government gives a company the opportunity to correct it. As long as they make amends within 3 weeks of the notification, they're fine. But ultimately, what the employees can be entitled to is up to 60 days of pay, 60 days of benefits. So there's a number of things that fall into play that we need to make sure that as those HR reps that we are saying we have to make sure that we're doing the right thing.
Just a side note, does anyone have operations in Canada by chance? No. I worked with an organization once that they were doing layoffs in several of their locations in the United States, and then they had one location in Montreal. And if you encounter a situation where you move to join an organization that has a location that's not in the United States, they have completely different regulations, different rules. So with the Montreal location, it was required. There were additional. They had their version of WARN, but there were no numbers attached to it as far as. Well, ours are very specific, and you have to, if you're doing any kind of layoff, you have to post it. Additionally, it's for us in the United States, it's voluntary for organizations to offer severance, and we're going to talk about severance in a little bit. But for example, in Canada, it's required to offer severance, and there's a calculation based on your tenure. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're overseeing groups in outside of the United States, just know that it's completely different ballgame and a completely different set of rules.
And to that point also, depending upon where you have operations, especially if you, for example, if you've been in HR more than a few minutes, anytime you have an operation in California, throw out the window any rules you know, double check with your attorneys and make sure you're following the rules for California, because it is very much more protective of the associate regarding any sort of layoff, reprimand, pay compensation, that sort of thing. So make sure we're clear on that. Where we often see people make mistakes, and we will have customers that come to us and they say, we're trying to lower our overall costs so that we can remain competitive. And what they tend to look at immediately is we're going to take a look at sort of our most expensive employees and where can we begin to do a reduction there. The reality is, more often than not, your most expensive employees are your most tenured, and conversely, they're probably your older workforce. And if an organization is not doing a few things to make sure that they're being fair and equitable, they need to do them. One is taking a look at the demographic of the organization as a whole. What is your makeup across race and gender lines, age lines? How is your organization currently laid out? And then when you pull together the list of people that are going to be affected by this reduction in force, how will your demographic look after that group is gone? And the reason for that is if you find that you have a predominantly impacted group that's based upon race or gender or age, so let's say your average, here's a good example, let's say your average age is 42 for your organization. And after the layoff, your average age drops to 35. You have a problem. So you have to look at the numbers. If let's just say your gender mix is 50-50. And after the layoff, the shift goes to 75% male, 25% female. You have a potential problem. So make sure that you're being fair about how you look at the numbers. What we often do, and we'll get lists. In fact, there's a staffing component to HTI's business, and there have been times over the years that we'll have a customer come and go, we're going to have a layoff, so we're going to impact these associates. We have to look at our temporary workforce and go, what is our demographic now? What will it be after we lay this group off? Is it compatible? Because they're our employees. So think along those lines.
Just a side note to that, in addition to demographics, if an individual is on FMLA, if there's an Americans with Disabilities Act situation, there are so many different aspects. And it's not that those individuals can't be a part of a reduction in force, but it just be aware of again, are you pulling primarily most of your employees who have been on FMLA in the past 12 months? So these are things that if you reach out to your attorneys, they will ask you these questions. They will want to know the ins and outs of who's being selected. The only exception to or potential exception to the demographics and the FMLA and the ADA piece is, let's say if there is an entire part of your organization it's one department that you are maybe selling a part of that business, then obviously that's the only group that if it impacts everyone, then the age, the race, the gender, FMLA, ADA, those aren't really an issue because you're taking an entire group, even if it's not your entire workforce, but it's one work cell that you're either selling off or getting rid of that part of the business.
Absolutely. And this is again where the complexities lie. Is you'll have people that'll do things that they think are with the best intentions. This particular individual has been out on FMLA for X amount of time. We don't foresee them returning to work, so we're going to go ahead and add them into the group that is going to be affected, and we'll provide them severance or we'll provide them whatever. That actually may be illegal, and they may have cause against you. So you need to make sure that it's fair. Most of the layoffs that we have been seeing over the last 6 to 12 months have really been very targeted. It's not the same as it was back 5 to 6 years ago. Back then, it was whole facilities closing. It was just really changes in the economy. The changes we are seeing now are much more targeted. We're moving a group to another location. We have decided to outsource our maintenance function. We have decided that one of the projects we're working on now in North Carolina is truly a product line that's an older product line, and it's kind of a dated technology, and it's finally reached the point that they're going, we cannot sustain to keep producing this dated technology. They've been bought out, and the facility's moving to Charlotte. So you have about 120 people who are being impacted. But it was one of those, even if they stuck around for a few more years, it would eventually go away. So it's a little different than just the days of there are no opportunities, the economy's bad, organizations aren't selling. It's a little more strategic and targeted. So you need to make sure that as you're putting together those types of packages, if that is the case, that you're only really focusing in, if that's your reason for the reduction, the people impacted are only the ones who would naturally be impacted by that reason.
We've shared a lot of information so far. Does anyone have, I know that we do this on a daily basis, but maybe we can see if anyone has any questions so far. No?
It's all right.
Just wanted to.
It is. It's a little bit of data dump. And so again, at any point, we'll stop a couple times, but if you have questions, definitely ask us. We have a couple of recommendations, especially if you're going through either a mass layoff or a shutdown. Specifically mass layoffs, consider doing a voluntary. That is actually one of the easiest ways to go ahead and make an impact, because I guarantee you're going to have a certain percentage of your organization that's going to say, you know what, I think I am ready. I think I'm ready to make a move. I'm ready to make a change. And if you put in place a severance package that is respective of their tenure within the organization, respective of their salary rate, that sort of thing, and you put it out there that, we're going to give people X amount of time to consider this. This is what you would receive where you decide to leave this. You'll be amazed at kind of how many organizations will see people, even on the last day, kind of come in and go, I've been thinking about this. Yeah, I think it's time for me to make a move. And so you can go ahead and impact. Now, the reality is you may lose some people you don't want to lose. That's the risk. But you would lose those people eventually anyway. If they're willing to take that severance and go, more than likely at some point they would have moved on for another opportunity. So look at that. Don't look at it as a loss. You've just forestalled something that would have come eventually.
Thank you. We're going to transition. On the voluntary side, I've seen this so often where organizations will want to ask certain people, so would you be interested in taking a voluntary package? And it's not that you actually know who you want in that group and target conversations with them. You really can't do that. But we see that so often. But it's really something that you would make an announcement to the organization. And so it's literally you are making it to everyone. So we see a lot of times where organizations might want to, say, target a group that or individuals that may be soon retiring. Again, not a good idea. Definitely don't do that. But you can share an announcement with the entire organization. Let them know that you're going to be going through a reduction in force, going through a layoff, and you want to see who's available. There was a group in the upstate that I worked with, and they hadn't considered the voluntary piece that we're talking about now, and they had to impact about 28 people, and it was amazing because about 25 came from the voluntary side, but it was also a workforce that their average tenure was close to 20 years. And so they had quite a large group that basically said, you know what, I was going to retire next year anyway. And they raised their hand and said, yeah, I'd like to. And so then, I mean, imagine that takes away having to select 25 people, which is difficult. I mean, it really is gut-wrenching to have to select individuals for a reduction.
It's a for those of you in HR, this is also difficult, and I'm just going to say this, and you know this, but you need to hear it. Is a part of this process is you now know, I mean, that's a tough part of HR to begin with. You end up knowing a lot of things that you don't want to know. And you have that employee that comes to you and they go, I'm buying a house, or I just found out that we're going to have a baby or whatever happens to be, and you know that this is coming. And that's a difficult time. And this is also why it's critical that anyone in the know for the processes keep it confidential. And part of the reason for that is not for what you would think. Part of it is it's amazing how quickly things change. We're currently working on a project with an organization here in the upstate, and the day before we were supposed to begin the project, the number was cut greater than in half. So something had changed. And had that information leaked, imagine the impact that it would have had on those other associates, and you might have lost some people that you otherwise were not intending to lose. So it's making sure that your leadership team understands the value of confidentiality and the value of why we have to make sure that we're being, again, fair and equitable, and that we're also protecting these employees and protecting the employees that are going to stay. When the decision itself is made, and you kind of have a list and you know who these associates are going to be, you need to have a communication strategy and work with your HR team. If you use any sort of an outplacement group, work with them, because these are groups that have actually done this a lot. Reach out to the local workforce boards, get them involved. The project that we just did in North Carolina, when they went to make the announcement to everyone, actually they'd already made the announcement, but they were basically bringing a group and go, this is how this is going to be handled. Western North Carolina sent, I don't know, what was it, Alicia? Probably 10 people from the government? Yeah, there's basically Alicia, Lori, and I standing in front of the room, and then probably between 10 and a dozen people from the state government there to talk about what all of their options are. Here's funding that you can get. Here's what's available to you and how we're going to help take care of you. So make sure you have that communication strategy in place. Make sure that you're using all the resources that you have available to you, but also, more importantly, make sure that you're contemplating every single question that people are going to have. And you're still going to miss some. Understand that. And that's why it often helps to have a partner. On the day of an announcement, you need to have a number of things ready. You need to have exactly, essentially, how the decision was made, why the decision was made in no uncertain terms, what's being done for the associates. So whether it's a letter of severance or the letter of separation, specifically what they get, how it's going to be paid out. Is it going to be paid out in a lump sum? Is it going to be paid out through salary continuation? What's going to happen with their benefits? When do their benefits end? Will they be eligible for COBRA? When can they, what are their COBRA, what am I thinking? What is it going to, what are their COBRA rates going to be? Sorry, the rates, such a tough word. What are their fees going to be for COBRA? Because again, that is the organization going to pay part of that fee to offset the cost? How can they file for unemployment? Will they be able to follow? Will it be contested? It's having all of these things, even the things that like contesting unemployment. In a layoff, you're going to go, no, we're not going to contest that. But someone's going to wonder it. And if you have one person that has that question, other people are going to have it. So make sure you have that. We always recommend just an FAQ. It is, a list of every single possible question you can ever think of. Recognize you're going to end up adding some to it to address that. If the reduction is going to happen that day, have a process in place for how you're going to handle having those people exit the facility. What is the communication strategy for the people that are staying? We highly recommend, especially on announcement day, working with, if your health insurance provider has an EAP function, get your EAP provider involved. And the reason for that is we tend to think that we have a good idea of how someone is going to respond. But at the end of the day, when they walk out the door, when they go home at night, you really don't know what their private life is like. And you don't know what some of the issues they're going to face and what a loss of employment will add to that. And we'll tell you, even though that we do career transition counseling and we work with individuals to help them find other jobs, we're not therapists. We're not. So that's why we partner with therapists and go, come on site, and we'll actually typically your EAP provider will actually, you can essentially contract them to take a day or 2 days. It's kind of that catastrophic event process of having someone just available to walk through the facility, talk with the people that are being affected, talk with the people that are remaining, making a service available to them.
I want to stress the importance of having EAP on site. A lot of organizations, they use an EAP group that is attached to their benefits, and that is something that's pretty standard because their benefit package typically includes a free EAP. And I'm gonna go out on a limb here and and say that benefits group EAP. If you're going through a reduction in force, I would partner with an EAP that is local, that is not a part of your benefit group, because the benefit group EAP is a very generic EAP. I know that I am on the internet saying this, but I feel very. I actually met Lori and Rob about 10 years ago, before I joined Human Technologies, and the organization I was with, we did a number of layoffs, unfortunately, due to our business and industry. But when I met with Lori and Rob, I literally, when we would go through a reduction in force, depending on how that individual would respond, and again, you never knew. The individuals that I thought that maybe would have a really difficult time, they actually said, "Oh my gosh, okay, so I get this many weeks of severance," and we had no idea that they were actually going to transition to another role or retire, and so they'd be fine. And then some individuals, they were just having an extremely hard time. We might not have known everyone's, obviously, the personal situation. And so if they were transitioning well in the conversation, they would meet with Lori and Rob. And I felt that they were okay to go ahead and meet with them about talking about the next step in their career. Depending on if they had a very difficult time, sometimes they'd be crying. Literally, I would have our EAP partner in the next room. And so on site, have your EAP partner, because those individuals need assistance. Caroline Trawick, she is with Upstate EAP. She's the director of that group. And I've worked with Caroline for over 10 years, and she is phenomenal. But it is probably it's something that we don't see a lot in the field, as far as having an outplacement group. They'll have us on site, but they really don't have that EAP piece on site. And I will just say that it's critical. It's critical.
With that, and truly, we cannot encourage you enough. I mean, you don't know how people are going to react until they react, and it can be a very difficult process. And just make sure that you're partnering with someone who can actually help you. If you are, many announcements, like the announcement that we just went through with the group in North Carolina, they were notified months in advance that the facility was going to be closed, and we were brought in to actually work with them. And You need, from an HR professional standpoint, along with your production group, need to be actually sitting down and going, how do we make sure that we still meet our customer demands? How do we make sure that we maintain the level of quality that we need? And a lot of that is going to come down to how, as a leadership team, you're communicating to the people that are being affected and also the people that are not being affected. It's having that, what sort of a legacy are we going to leave as a team? Are we going to view this as a very sad opportunity? The group that's leaving in North Carolina today, they're having a giant potluck luncheon to kind of celebrate this change. And that may seem odd, but a lot of people need that. They need, it's that whole, we've had a great run, we've had a great opportunity, we work with great people. It's now time for change. So let's celebrate that change. And that's where a lot of organizations, it feels awkward, so we don't want to talk about it. So on the last day, it's a very quiet and somber, and no one speaks. The tone, you set the tone. You truly set the tone. And if you're going to allow it to be that, that's exactly how it's going to be. But if you're going to go, you know what, it's been a great run, we're taking care of our people well, we're going to celebrate this, we're going to make sure that you're taken care of. For the people that are remaining, we're going to make sure that they see that people are being taken care of, and it ultimately makes the transition easier. If you are staggering your workforce, look at your retention bonuses. Look at either stay bonuses, look at performance initiatives, look at anything that you can actually tie to. If you stay through X date, this is what you will get. Talk with your finance group. Also make sure, and it's good to also have just your legal group involved in all of these decisions, because you want to make sure that from a state and federal standpoint that you're handling all of these, especially the monetary transactions, are being handled fairly and legally. But begin to look at, how do you keep those people? How do you keep your key people until the very end? What do you need to do to make sure that you retain them? I can tell you, regardless, I met with a gentleman yesterday who was supposed to have stayed through June for the company in North Carolina, and his last day is today. And he's like, yep, I'm giving up my stay bonus, I'm giving up this, but I ran across an opportunity that I can't pass up, and I'm moving on. So they're having to adjust. That's just part of the process. You're going to lose key people that you need to hang on to, but plan for that. Make sure you have backups. Make sure you have other opportunities or other people in place to handle those issues should they need to be handled.
I'm going to make just a quick comment on the severance. So organizations are not required, obviously, to offer severance, but it's a very good thing to assist employees with the transition. But with Rob just mentioned about partner with your legal group, it's very important. Typically, severance is in exchange for them waiving, whether it be lawsuits, or there's typically about a 10-page waiver with most severances. But something that's important in partnering with your legal group as well, and is your severance agreements. These aren't agreements that really we should just draft up. These are legal documents that your attorneys should draft, because there are in the HR field, we know that things change constantly. Laws change constantly. And you actually, if you have individuals that are under 40, they actually get a different agreement than individuals who are over 40. So an individual who's over 40, they would actually have legally, they have the right to sign the agreement the day of if they choose to, but then they can rescind their signature within 7 days. And so that should be embedded within those agreements. And so it's really essential to partner with resources that can assist with that language.
Well, Jen, while you're talking about that, do you want to talk a little bit more also about how to make sure we're effectively handling 401k, retirement? What are some of your recommendations for how we make sure we communicate that, and what are some of the considerations we have?
So when one hears that they're being impacted and they're going to be laid off, initially the thought is their paycheck. The thought is they have families, they have mortgages, etc. The thought shortly after that is my benefits. How are my benefits impacted? And so Rob had mentioned earlier, have a frequently asked questions sheet available that basically outlines everything, especially this medical piece, the benefit piece. So they'll want to know within this document, within this, it should be a one-pager. It should be really a simple document. But when does their medical benefit end? And that depends on your plan document. So your plan document may say that benefits end the last day of the month in which the last day you worked. So again, your medical plan document indicates when your medical expires. Your typically disability expires the day of the last day worked. Then there's the life insurance. Does the plan allow for a life insurance conversion? There are a lot of individuals who don't have life insurance outside of their employer. Let's see, medical, dental, vision, all of those benefits. Now, COBRA. Some people have heard of COBRA, but COBRA basically is the right to continue benefits it's under a different umbrella than the. So it's under basically COBRA is a federal law that requires employers to continue your benefits. They can also elect different benefits. So it's kind of like an open enrollment. They need to know that. They need to know that if they want to drop dental and drop vision, that they have the right to do that at that time. So let me see, what else am I missing? But basically, go to her. But that, I would say that piece is so important. One of the groups that we recently worked with, she was talking about joining her husband with his business. They were close to retirement age, and I said, what are your COBRA rates? That might be an option. And she said, COBRA. I didn't even think about COBRA. So it's actually, sometimes these really important pieces are missed during a reduction, but COBRA is a significant piece. And so we just circled back with the HR team and helped them with creating this frequently asked question sheet, because that basically was the answer to her question. She's like, because it is a higher rate. You basically pay your rate, the employer's rate, and an administrative fee. But to have this piece of paper that they could reference is really important. Something I want to mention that Rob touched on, but I think that it is, and we talk about this quite often, that's really important, is leaving a legacy. And Rob mentioned communication strategy. And the leaders of the organization, when we're going through a reduction in force, your role sets the stage for everything, sets the tone for everything. And if I had a group that I worked with, and the leader really wanted to set the tone to leave a legacy. And you can actually, based on your leadership, you can have a group that is even more engaged than before the announcement. But it all depends on the leadership within the transition. And so to have that, you either have that option of the somberness that you talked about, whether it's from the day of the announcement to the last day, or this engaged group. And it is possible because we've seen it. We've definitely seen it in the field. As far as, let's see, 401k, that is something that I didn't mention. So 401k, it's actually something that people don't think about too much, and they call later. They call kind of after the fact. So it's one thing that you want to have available for them so that they know the answers. Now, the 401k group will also send something in the mail, but I don't really want someone to know about their 401k through the mail. I want them to know through if it's within our organization, I want them to know through us. Or if it's a group we're working with, I think it's good for the HR team to share what happens with 401k.
And if you talk with your provider, often your provider will actually send a rep just to come in and talk, or you can usually find someone, we actually have someone that we partner with that we will bring in and speak to a group, and they're not there to sell them anything. It's just essentially, these are what your rights are, these are what your options are, so that, like I said, a letter is fine, but you know your workforce, what percentage of your workforce is A, going to read it, and B, truly understand what it means. So if you have somebody that can actually coach them through that process, they're ultimately going to be happier.
Because the individuals who normally think about their 401k right away, they're more living week to week, and their initial thought is, I'm going to take the money. And that is a significant hit from a tax standpoint. And so, and also the plan document will determine whether they can keep their money in the plan or if they're required to roll it out within a certain number of days or within a certain time. So that 401k piece is important. Now, when you get your 401k information in the mail, if you still get it in the mail, do you read it? But I mean,
most people flip open the document, they look at the little circle, and then they see if there's parentheses around the amount that they've got. Did it go up or down? That's what I care about. So.
Well, and the one that we get quarterly in the mail, we read that because we just look at the graph, right? But if you get a piece of paper that basically has just a lot of legalese in the document, you're not going to read it. So the 401k piece is big. Just pausing real quick. We're dumping a lot of info. Any questions that you have at this point?
Let me ask something else.
Okay.
Well, I really want you to speak a little more later on, if you've got time, to the strategies associated with communicating with the group that has survivor's guilt.
Okay.
So
I think that was a great time to talk
I'm really
about that.
interested in that. So.
And there's a couple of the strategies we've already talked about, even if we didn't initially, even if we didn't direct them to that. It depends upon the process. So if you have an individual being affected, that is just one person is going to be laid off within a group, or if it's going to be a large group, and then are those people leaving that day? Are those people staying? At the end of the day, it's all about communicating. It's all about letting people know this is what is happening. This is why it's occurred. I hate to say this. We find a lot of leadership groups, they just want to, the process is so difficult that once they get kind of through D-Day, we hit the point that, all right, this is the reduction. They kind of want to just breathe and not speak. Or they at least want to kind of put it out of their minds for a little bit. But the reality is that's when your work begins. It's communicating openly that, a decision had to be made and owning the fact this was a hard decision. This was a difficult decision. It was not taken lightly. We made this. Here is our strategy going forward. And it doesn't need to be simply we're trying to stop a backslide. It needs to be we're stopping the backslide, and here's our strategy for moving forward. So there may come, we want to see a day that we hire people back. If it's an individual, you also need to coach your supervision, basically, especially if you're in manufacturing, whatever your service industry is, all the way down to the level of supervisor, whoever's touching the floor. They need to be coached very specifically on how to talk about it, how to openly talk about it. We counsel people on this a lot, leadership teams. The difference between I agree and I understand. You'd be amazed at the legal implications behind I agree versus I understand. And what I mean by that is when a person is finding themselves in a position of losing their job, especially if you're talking either individual or small group, what we often see is that individual or those individuals, it can't be their fault. Every single person in this room, if you ever let somebody go, you probably had that person that sat across the table that wasn't their fault. And they want you to tell them that it's okay, that they're right. You know what? I agree. This is bad. This is not good. And they're going to walk out going, see, I told you, this wasn't my fault.
Or I agree we did this poorly.
Or I agree we did this poorly. And that's what they want. They're looking for that. It's not about me. It's about the situation. And as simply as coaching your leadership staff, that someone can sit and talk as much as they want about how they feel like a situation is being handled poorly or unfairly. You can go, listen, I understand. I understand that you're frustrated. I understand that this is concerning. It's concerning for everyone. I understand that you have these issues, and I'm going to work with you on them. We're going to try to work through them. You can understand something all day, but agreeing with it is different. If you have a group that's going to be staying for a period of time, from a communication standpoint, these FAQs, these links to resources, that sort of thing, they need to be sort of advertised to everyone. And the reason for that is you want the people that are remaining to see. You want it to be visible. Whatever actions that you're taking on behalf of the organization, you want the people that are remaining to see what's being done. Because you want them going, all right, well, I feel bad that I'm going to be losing the person standing next to me, but I know they're being taken care of. And if you're working with, if you use an outplacement service or outplacement resource for this, let me step back for one thing. Make sure that you know what your resources are available to you from a state and federal standpoint. One of the things we didn't talk about today, does anybody know the Trade Adjustment Act, Trade Adjustment Assistance? And most people don't realize this. If your organization is being impacted by foreign trade, if something's been outsourced to a foreign country, if your business has been impacted due to trade initiatives or foreign competition, your employees may be eligible to have money spent for retraining, for job interview support, for relocation. There's a lot of things that are available that most of us are not aware of. So make sure you've already got everything in line of every single resource you could possibly provide to your associates before you make the announcement. And then once you make the announcement, it needs to be just a constant data flow. Here's what we have available to you. One person in this, the group that we are working with in North Carolina was about 120 people. If we get one person that asks one question, we change our FAQ sheet and we put the answer on it and we stick it up on the bulletin board so that every single person in the facility, whether they're leaving or not, can read what the question was and read what the answer is. We have regular communication meetings with leadership staff where it's just sitting everybody down in the break room and going, hey, we've had a couple questions come up. Because again, it's like the plan documents. Don't assume someone's going to read it. Make sure that you're talking with everyone, that absence of knowledge is an excuse for why you didn't handle something a certain way.
Just a note on the Trade Adjustment Act. You had mentioned strategy. The timeline, having a timeline, I had talked with a group, it's our second trip to North Carolina. We were on the way back and got a call from a group that they were going to do a reduction, and it was Thursday, and they were going to make the announcement on Monday. But it was a pretty significant impact. But the importance of strategy, the question that you asked, is Trade Adjustment Act. That's not something that you can actually do from Thursday to Monday, right? And so it's you have to actually file a petition to the Department of Labor, and so that's something that there's a process to that. So the strategy really also depends on is it a closure? If it's a closure versus 120 people, that's the group that we're working with right now, just north of here. A closure may also involve the community. It may involve contacting a local news channel to kind of get in front, because they will contact you.
And what you don't share with people, they will fill in the gaps for themselves. So you set the narrative. You set how that's going to be addressed. Go ahead. Especially the biggest thing, one of the advantages we found in Western North Carolina is we reached out to the local community. We went through SHRM. We went through local manufacturing organizations, the Manufacturers Alliance for the upstate, and just said, these people are being affected. And it was amazing who came out of the woodwork. And just saying, well, we have openings, or what can we do to help, or whatever, and at least gets things, gets things moving for people.
Because people want to help.
People do.
They absolutely want to help.
Has anybody here ever been through a layoff? Themselves, actually been affected themselves? I have. It changes how you look at it. I'm sorry, what was your question?
Yeah, I just want to mention a story I heard about Friday to Monday, a merger situation where the acquiring company decided to fire all the employees on Friday and rehire them under the new banner on Monday. It did not realize that some of them were on a green card and they could not be rehired.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
It's complex. So there's not really a one-size-fits-all strategy. But it just depends on the situation. But yeah, they're
Well, and that's part of the reason. That's part of the reason we also recommend that some facilities find themselves in such a financial situation that they don't maybe necessarily have the resources to truly provide a level of outplacement or career transition assistance. But if you do, these are invaluable resources not only to you and your leadership team, but also to your associates. Part of the strategy that we take is working with your team on what that communication strategy is. Actually, if at all possible, we try to be on site the day that the announcement is made, which is that conversation of you stand up, you make the announcement, you go, here's what's happening, here's why we're making this decision, and here is Rob and Jen. They're going to be working with you, and here are the things they're going to do. Because what we want to do, and a good outplacement organization that you'd work with is going to want to help your associates shift their focus. And it's shifting their focus from, oh my gosh, I can't believe what's happened to me, to what are my opportunities? What is next? And if we begin to help coach those people in that direction, you'll find they'll dwell for less of a period of time on the event that has occurred and begin to look at what the next opportunity is going to be like. We absolutely encourage, from a best practice standpoint, if you're going to use any sort of an outplacement service, make sure that they are engaged with your employees within 48 hours of the announcement. And that's if you have an individual that's laid off, that group's able to reach out to them within 48 hours. If it's an announcement, we did a project a couple of years ago where we agreed to meet with 240 people in a 24-hour period. And we worked through
not just me.
not just the two of us.
Entire team.
But we had an entire team that stayed at a facility for 24 hours to make sure that we sat down face-to-face with every single associate and went, A, it's going to be okay, but here's what we're going to do. What questions do you have right now? It's interesting to watch the president of our company go, I'm going to go take a nap in the car for a half hour and then come back in and start meetings again. So, but if you're going to use an outplacement group, find out exactly sort of what are the services that they're going to provide to you. How often can you expect them to be on site with your team? Is it going to be a primarily online program? Will they do group training sessions? Will they do individual training sessions? Something we didn't really mention, but when it comes to severance and it also comes to outplacement, your exempt and your hourly groups, they can be different programs. And also, what's interesting, we tend to find that exempt staff need more help than hourly staff do. They need a bit more coaching through the process. They need a bit more coaching through updating their resumes, getting ready for interviews, negotiating an offer, those sorts of things. The hourly associates actually tend to do a little better on their own. They want some advice and some guidance, but there's a level of one-on-one requirement that in fact, what's interesting is the higher up the chain you go, typically the more attention the person needs.
Just a note on, there are different groups. I've worked with numerous groups over the years, partnering to help with outplacement. And when I joined HTI a couple of years ago, joining this team that now we do outplacement, and I'm not just in the field being on the side partnering with you guys, but what I realized, I didn't realize the level of commitment that the team has. When we were in North Carolina, Rob's going through and searching local employers that we can actually. When I say actively, I'm talking he's linking with them on LinkedIn, he's looking them up on different organizations on Twitter, and I was about to. And there was a company that he's like, what? There's a company opening, and we're just going to go on site. It's a construction site. They're hiring, but and so we're like in a hard hat zone.
We went and knocked on trailer doors until we found the HR team.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, you don't know me, but I've wandered onto your site, and here's what we're doing.
But I never knew that level of commitment, and it's really exceptional. You're welcome. But it's and there are groups that their outplacement consists of that they'll talk with your team on the phone, and where that is helpful. If I'm impacted, I want someone who's going to go on a construction site to try to help me find a job. Well, I don't have my watch on, so I don't even know how we doing.
9:24.
Oh, we're doing well.
We have, and something I'll actually, in fact, so Alicia, a number of you have kind of met Alicia through emails and that sort of thing, and she's actually been phenomenal. She's a part of our marketing team, and she single-handedly coordinated a job fair for our customer in Western North Carolina. We just reached out to a bunch of companies and said, here's what's happening. We worked with the employer to bring these companies on site to their lunchroom, and we had 18 companies show up that wanted to actually speak with these employees. If your organization is facing this sort of thing right now, it's actually a good time for your associates. If we were having this conversation 6 to 10 years ago, we would be having a completely different conversation. So, our biggest push is make sure you know what resources are available to your company, to your employees, that we're utilizing all of those, that we're answering all of their questions, and we are repeating our answers constantly, that we are coaching our leaders and our supervisors on how to effectively show empathy. Just, recognizing that this person's job is being affected. You're going to have that employee that's going to come into your office one day and they may just start crying or be angry. And how do you handle that? Because it says a lot about, again, the employee that's leaving, how they're going to feel about the organization. What are they going to say about you when they leave? What are the employees that are remaining going to say about you as they stay? And all of that comes down to them seeing you putting forth effort to take care of them. We didn't talk about this earlier, but I do feel like it needs to be said, is as you're beginning to work with your finance group, make sure that you're considering exactly how you want to handle any payouts that you're going to have. The easy answer is a lump sum distribution that you give to your associates that they get a check once they've signed, any severance agreement, whatever it happens to be. The reality is that's often the hardest and the most impactful for the individual. If you have the ability and the resources to do salary continuation, use it. I mean, that seems really simple because it does. It puts a little added burden on your accounting group, but the reality is if you have the availability, just that impact of let's say it's a 60-day severance. If they get it all in one lump sum, they're going to take a major tax hit. And the reality is we know our associates. Not everyone, they look at it as, I've won the lottery, and within a few months or within a month or so, that money is gone. So if we have the ability to, that's one other way that we can continue our reach of assistance to the employees that have left our organization. Also, when they've left, they're not gone forever. It doesn't become the whole, we shall no longer speak this person's name. But it's understandable. We actually, we had a project a couple of years ago where we did a big poster with a big tree. And every single person that found a job, we stuck their name up there. And if they were allowed us to, we wrote the name of the company they went to. And that served as a couple of things. One, it showed the associates who remained that these people are taken care of. But it allowed them to reach out. They knew where to find those people in the future. And the people that were still looking for opportunities, they went, Jen went over to so-and-so company. I think I'm going to call her and see if there's anything else going on over there. So get creative. Work with your outplacement group. Work with your EAP. Really get outside the box on what is available to you and your team and how you can assist them. We only have a couple of minutes left. I want to make sure that we're respectful of everybody's time. Had some great questions and comments. Is there anything, you kind of mentioned strategy. Is there anything else that we want to talk about in that regard, or is there any other questions that we want to make sure we answer today before we get out?
And we can assist also based on we can talk after about just if your situation,
No two situations are alike.
They are so different.
By any stretch. Even within your organization, if you've experienced a layoff in the past and you're getting ready to have one again, whether it's individual or group, they will be different. That's just the way it works. All right. Thank you for coming out today. We will be hanging around. We do have a couple things we want to make sure that you are aware of, and of course I left it laying on the table, and Alicia's going to get on to me. So we have a few upcoming events we want to let everybody know about before you leave. So of course we have Friday Morning Coffee coming up on March the 4th. The topic we're going to be discussing is, are your practices and policies in line with new legislation regarding same-sex marriage laws? Stephen Woods from Ochiltree Deacons will be in. Stephen's phenomenal. If you've not met Stephen, great speaker, sharp guy. free legal advice. Think
Yes.
free legal advice. We also host an annual culture series, and it's a 4-part series that goes throughout the year. It actually starts in March as well. And essentially, we handle 4 topics: sparking change, casting your vote, how do you make an organization change, what we call moving the needle, which is how do you make something happen even if you don't have the authority to do it, and then how do you sustain that change.
And the comment on that piece, because I like mic. Normally he knows I don't like the mic, so when I reach for it, it's. But this culture series piece, it's this is something that we love. I mean, if there's organizational culture, Rob and I, we assist organizations, whether it's new leadership or they're going through some change, and help organizations with their culture, with their purpose, and so we assist organizations throughout the year. And so this is, we start in March, but this is an opportunity where we kind of give you all of our inside information. And so this is, you basically get to learn what we educate employers on throughout the year. And it's 4 half-day sessions. It'll go through December, so 1 each quarter. And then we're also going to mix it up a little bit and have accountability sessions in between each quarterly session, and it's going to be very informal, to where we get together and we talk about, so what is it that you're encountering? What is it? How are you moving the needle?
And at the end of one year, you should, if you want a change to occur, you should see that change occur. And that's the goal. It's not just to give you ideas. It's to pick a problem you're facing, and by the end of the year, you've made a significant impact on that problem.
Because culture is so subjective, I mean, it's so subjective. And so what we do is we're actually adding an objective piece and helping you with the journey with something that's so subjective. So sorry.
What's the last piece?
The last piece is leadership and employment law. We have a session. Rob and I do a full-day session periodically, and the next one is going to be on April 21st. And basically, the first half of the day talks about leading others. Leadership does not occur because you have a title. If you have a title of a leader, it doesn't matter if you're the CEO or plant manager. The fact that you hold those titles does not mean that you effectively lead others. And so the first half of the day, we talk about leadership and leading others. The second half of the day, we go through 4 aspects of employment law: Family Medical Leave Act, Americans with Disabilities Act, Anti-Harassment, and Fair Labor Standards Act, and lots of change on the Fair Labor Standards Act side. So, so if you joined us today, there's a special code for a promo. Alicia, she added a promo in. So if you're interested in that leadership and employment law session, there's a promo code to get.
For those of you that are in HR, great if you have new leaders, new supervision. It's a very good way to show them what their style is, and also make sure, because we kind of sell it to the HR side of things, of here's knowing the law, and here's how to best work with HR to make sure that you're taking care of your people. You'll hear me say fair and equitable a lot, that you're being fair and equitable.
And we equip them with enough to know when to engage you.
Yes.
So we don't equip them to become masters within a half day, but they'll know when to engage you on the HR side. So, well, thank you.
That's it, everybody. Thanks for coming in today.